Greetings and welcome back to CERN for Dummies. Mandela Effect, Geography, and Maps of the World have changed. If you're just now finding us, please look in the comments to go back to part 1. This is now part 7. We're picking up on the chapter of string theory. Let's take a look at the different string theories. There's only one theory that has 26 dimensions. It's called the Bosniak type. In this theory, there are only bosons, no fermions, which means that there are only forces, no matter, and both open and closed strings. We'll get into more of that later. The major flaw in this theory is that there must be the existence of a particle called a tachyon. A tachyon is a hypothetical elementary particle that travels at speeds exceeding that of light. According to the theory of relativity, the speed of light is the limiting velocity for all ordinary material particles. Particles having non-zero rest mass can approach, but not reach, the speed of light, since their mass would become infinite at that speed. Theorists have argued that since nothing in principle prohibits the existence of a third class of particles that can travel only at speeds exceeding that of light, such particles may quite possibly exist. Like the original theory of relativity, the theory of tachyons has several aspects that appear to contradict common sense, but are fully self-consistent. For example, a tachyon must have an imaginary, well, in mathematical sense, a rest mass, or what would they say, a proper mass, and it must travel faster rather than slow down when it loses energy. The center part of the diagram is the throne of God. In this heavenly realm, matter as we know it does not exist. This is an agreement with the Bosniak 26 string theory. In the center circle of the diagram is a Bosniak 26 field of physics. It is the only one of the three fields of physics that has all four forces fully present. All four forces are present around the center and in the midst of the center field of physics, which is an agreement that there are only forces that are present in the 26 string theory. There are 26 strings that originate from the center field. The Bible teaches us that God exists outside of the space-time dimension. A tachyon, being faster than that speed of light, has escaped the space-time dimension and, in fact, exists outside of it. I would deduce that this theory proves the existence of God, His angels, and His creations. Having beings that can travel faster than the speed of light explains how our prayers can be heard in real time from our Father in heaven. Existing outside the space-time dimension explains how God can and does predict events that are to come. It lets us know how God can be the Alpha and the Omega, omnipotent and omniscient. Going beyond the boundaries of common sense, but at the same time being sound in theory, explains why God warned us not to try to understand Him, for we do not have the capability to fully comprehend and understand who He is in all of His glory. Merely stating that God exists outside of space and time, that He is all-powerful and all-knowing, that there is neither a beginning nor an end to Him, baffles most of us today. Although these statements made by God of who He is, as profound as they are, do pass the common sense test. In fact, they must be true. Science, with its 26 string theory, has provided the means to prove the existence of God. It is no wonder that the tachyon is what theoretical physicists consider to be the major flaw in this theory. It is not the major flaw. It is the answer that they are searching for. I think it is appropriate at this time to quote astronomer Robert Jastrow, a professed agnostic. Quote, "For the scientist who lives by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over that final rock, he is only greeted by by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. Unquote. When we look at 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8, we find another example where theologians were ahead of scientists. It reads, "But beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord 1 day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day." Unquote. This is the aspect of Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. One facet of this theory is that time is relative to where you are in the universe and how fast you are traveling. Light travels in waves. Time is measured by the frequency of the wavelengths that pass you. The faster you travel, the less times the wavelength of light passes you. I need to do a diagram and explain this later. I'll do through relativity and time for dummies, I guess. Not to offend the coin term. Anyway, moving along. So anyway, the faster you travel, the less times the wavelengths of light pass you. Thus, time is slower the faster one goes until they reach the speed of light. When one travels at the speed of light or that frequency, they are no longer traveling as fast as the wavelength of light. It's kind of like being like a roller coaster, and that's time, and you run faster and faster until you finally jump on the roller coaster, and now you become one with time, and time ceases to exist. So you catch up to the wavelength of light, in other words. And then there's nothing to measure time after that. So therefore, the waves are no longer able to pass them. So like when you're on the roller coaster, nothing passes you after that. The result is that there is no unit to measure time. Therefore, time stops at the speed of light. Scientists thought of a way to test this theory. Oh, I love this part. I forgot about that. Anyway, if it was correct, then you should be able to take two of the most accurate clocks in the world, an atomic clock, put one on the ground and one on an airplane, have the airplanes fly around the world nonstop, or just around the disk, as some say. When it gets back, because it was traveling faster than the clock on the ground, time should be slower for it. Well, they did just that. When the clock and the airplane returned, it had lost 15 seconds. We're talking about an atomic clock. A quartz clock loses 15 seconds every 2 weeks. The quartz, in the old style, I'm dating myself here. Anyway, it is impossible for an atomic clock to lose 15 seconds in a 24-hour time period, unless the theory of relativity was true. This is only one facet of Albert Einstein's theory of relativity that we are able to prove. There are parts to his theory dealing with gravity that we thought scientists would never be able to prove. But with the advancements of telescopes, we have been able to observe things in space that can only begin to be explained by Einstein's theories. The faster you travel, the slower time is for you, until you reach the speed of light, where time stops. Peter, in the Bible, is clearly stating that the way you experience time is relative to where you are in the universe. Just as Albert Einstein stated in the theory of relativity, 1 day with the Lord in heaven is the same as 1,000 days on earth. And 2,000 years on earth is the same as 1 day with the Lord in heaven. Let me read that again. 1 day with the Lord in heaven is the same as 1,000 days on earth. So when you're with 1 day in the Lord, 1,000 years will go by on earth. However, 2,000 years on earth is the same as 1 day with the Lord. So 2,000 years on earth is like 1 day in heaven. But he's talking about a difference in time, different space-time reference. Here, do you get it? In one concept, if when you're in heaven, 1 day is 1,000 years, but when you're on earth, 2,000 years is 1 day. He's explaining the theory of relativity in the Bible here. This is why the Bible is loaded with physics. So it's astonishing how a person who lived in a time where people thought the world was flat, well, maybe it is, we don't know, and the universe revolved around the earth, knew about one facet, one of the most advanced theoretical physics theories of all time. So they knew this theory that time is relative way back when. All right, there's the chapter string theory. We're going to cut off here and go on to the next part. Please check back for the link or search Byron Preston's channel. For questions, email me. PrestonByron@yahoo.com. PrestonByron at yahoo.com. God bless. Good night.